Yes.
Otherwise, we can restart. That's not a problem. Yeah.
Sure, sir. So basically, sir, just to lay the background of this interview, sir, we've just started on the 21st of April on the Civil Services Day, 2023. We started this magazine called Palash, and this was on the explicit instruction of the Chief Secretary, sir, because he thought that our cadre needs a voice of its own. So from the second edition onwards, which we are planning to launch by the end of July, we are planning to have this interview section of retired officers, so that number one, young officers could get in touch with the officers who worked for long periods in the cadre and then learn from their wisdom. And secondly, we become a closer knit cadre, sir. There's a feeling within the cadre that we are not as close knit as the erstwhile Bihar cadre was. So just in that direction, we've started this segment. And we thought that you will be the first person we'll interview for this segment, sir. And this, I'll focus this interview not very strictly on issues like related to core policy or the development of Jharkhand. So it'll be related more to your life as an IAS officer in the Jharkhand and the erstwhile Bihar cadre. So with that background, sir, the first question I would like to ask is, sir, before joining the IAS, because I was going through your profile and you joined the IAS at a very young age, sir. So what was your life like before joining the IAS in your home state of Kerala? So where were you born and raised? Yes, sir, if you could.
Well, I was born in a district called Palakkad, which is
Right.
famously known for musicians, cooks and crooks, as Mr. T.N. Sheshan, who is a native of Palakkad, would say. Well, the Palakkad did produce a large number of ICS and IAS officers, and many in the IFS. Shiv Shankar Menon, my batchmate, who became National Security Advisor, his father, his grandfather, they were all from that place. So by and large, it had a history, but that was not what kind of prompted me to join. Actually, after my graduation, I went to Trivandrum to study my postgraduate in physics. And that's where I met a lot of people who are aspirants to civil servants. So I said, okay, give it a shot. So, I would say I was a little underconfident to start with. So what I did was, in those days, the pattern was you had to write 3 lower papers and 2 higher papers. That was how the exam was. 3 compulsory, 3 lower, 3 higher. And if you are, the higher papers were only for the IAS and IFS.
Okay.
The lower, so you could write 3 plus 3 and be in the income tax, or 3 plus 2, I think, and be in the police or something like that.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure. Therefore, I took 5 different subjects, thinking that next year I'll crack it.
Okay.
So therefore, I ended up with a lower mark and a lower kind of rank, but then I made it. So that's it.
Right.
So, but I, then of course, Masuri never allotted cadres as soon as you join. It was much later in the day that you got to know your cadre. And I was quite disappointed that I had to go to Bihar.
Right.
Somehow, Bihar was a black kind of a hole in my geography. But I hadn't been there, and I didn't know, how it was, and whatever you hear wasn't very complimentary.
Right.
So I was quite a bit disappointed. When I went there, of course, it was like it's a different world that what you have grown up in terms of social customs, infrastructure, administrative ethics, everything.
Right.
It was very different. So it took a bit of time to get adjusted to the reality that is Bihar. So
just before you start with your actual career in the Bihar Indian Administrative Service, so we, as I was born in the early 90s, so we get an impression, we are often told that Bihar was not this bad in before the early 90s or in the 70s and 80s. But from what you say, the impression is even in those days it did not have a very good reputation. So even in the 70s, did Bihar had that reputation of a say place where the rule of law is not very strictly enforced?
Well, it was not so much of what we define as lawlessness right now. I would think that coming from Kerala, the difference was stark.
Right.
Like caste hierarchies, patriarchal systems, power equations, and if you're very powerful landlord, you could get away with anything you wanted, etc. So that kind of bothered me, in the sense that I had just come out of college and I had about 6 months of experience, about 7 months of experience in a bank. But that, it was a bit of a shock for me.
Right.
So, well, that I knew was going to be something, but in a sense, that discomfort of where I was did help me in innovating. I mean, that's the other way of looking at it. Had I been very comfortable with the system, I would not have done anything to change it. So
Right.
this urge to do something different also came from that discomfort. So, as they say, energy comes from that disturbance within the system. So
And so
that's
coming from Kerala, you must not have. I'm guessing you would not have such a good command over Hindi, and in Bihar, very few people even speak English, especially in the hinterland. So was learning the language a problem for you, sir?
no. I had studied Hindi in school for about 5 years or 4 years.
Right.
I could read and write,
Right, sir.
but I couldn't converse very fluently. But I could read everything that was given to me.
Right, sir.
So it was kind of then getting used to speaking,
Right.
which typically is a problem, because what happens is, if you are used to one language, whichever is your language, mother tongue or whichever,
Right.
speak another language, you think in that original language and then try to translate in your mind.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So it's a bit of a problem, but later on I got used to it. I understood that as an SDO or a collector, I needed to communicate with ordinary people. So I made an extra effort to listen mostly, and also to speak whatever I wanted to convey. So that was the motivation. It was not so much that, I said, look, if I have to be effective, I
Right.
need to understand what the people are telling me, and I need to talk to them. So this was the driving force.
Right, sir. Right.
It was a different motivation to learn that language. So
Right.
I actually started speaking the language with a typical Bihari accent and all that. So
I think it
it
happens with.
wasn't. In fact, my friends in Lucknow used to criticize me. They said,
Right.
"Yaar, tum Hindi bol rahe ho ki Bihari bol rahe ho?" So that used to be the joke.
I think it
But
tends to
I said, no,
come.
I'm speaking to communicate. Therefore, it
Right.
doesn't matter whether I'm grammatically correct.
Right, sir. Absolutely, sir. Absolutely, sir.
And what bothered me was what you guys call administrative Hindi. I
Right.
thought it was neither very administrative nor very Hindi. So that was a problem for me to translate things and things. So, but I had a dictionary. So I said, okay, what I have to write, I know what to do.
I think,
But
sir,
my motivation was to communicate.
even for native speakers, the administrative Hindi that we use in the files is not that easy
It's
to.
terrible. I think time to change it.
Yes,
One
sir.
of the things that probably Chat GPT will change.
Right, sir. Right, sir. So we are often told, as soon as we enter the IAS or the cadre, we are often told that your first posting as an SDO or your probationer district and your probationer DC will have a long impact on your future career, whether you realize it at that moment or not. So since we are very early in the career, sir, we don't have that perspective. But since you are now 50 years into the service, so what perspective do you have of your probationer period and your first SDMship in the Bihar cadre, sir?
Well, my first probationer period, I must say that I learned quite a bit from the lower echelons of bureaucracy, because somehow I realized that the real learning is at the treasury head clerk and the deputy collector who hears us thing. How does he write a note? And I didn't have any IAS officer as an SDO then when I was under training. They
Which
were all
district
mostly
was it,
the
sir? Just to.
Munger.
District. Okay. So,
So I didn't bother too much the collector. I mean, I did meet him and take some instructions from him. I told him, sir, I would like to learn the little nitty gritty of how these offices run, because I realized that most of the harassment and corruption takes place there. If the collector doesn't understand the nuts and bolts, he's not going to be as effective as he would like to be. I mean, there's something that in the first month I realized. I think probably first month I was in the treasury and I found all kinds of tamasha going on there, and that's where I learned it. So then I realized, oh, no, I'm going to sit with these guys, spend time, learn whatever. So to that extent, I think the training period, it's up to you how much you learn.
right.
And what you learn. Subdivision, I was very happy because I had an excellent collector, and it was a single subdivision district. So, and we had too many challenges, the JP agitation, a major flood covering half the district. So, I mean, 1+1 was not enough between the two of us. So we had to work really hard, 16, 17, 18 hours a day, both of us. And that was really kind of hands-on.
Right.
So, and then the 20-point program came, JP agitation was on, emergency came. So everything was in those 2 years packed
Right,
from
sir.
both ends. So
Right.
that was, learning by doing. And I think that's extremely important, because one of the things that you learn from your collector is that today the district collector is held responsible for many things which are really not in his domain. Very often you will find something goes wrong and वो collector का phone आता है कि भाई आप क्यों नहीं कुछ किया, and you haven't even met that department fellow or or looked at him seriously. Then we realized, how to take responsibility, and if you have to take responsibility, then you need to have a grip on people, on what is happening in any sphere in the district. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you have jurisdiction or not. And I remember that when I was SDO, one of the major campaigns we did successfully was smallpox eradication. Nothing to do, basically in those days, the health department was responsible. But we realized that it's beyond the health department to do it. There are lots of social and other issues which we had to handle.
Right, sir.
So that's where we realized that, many of the things we need to work with more people, including people's representatives, and also, social, and you will always find some good fellows somewhere.
Right, sir. Absolutely.
Find them, you look for them, you find them. It's very easy to get them to work for you.
Right.
Good idea, honest commitment, it works.
Right. So, like listening to the initial part of your career in your own words, so we are often like we get a feeling that once you join the civil service, and especially the IS, since you start interacting with the people at a very early stage of your career, you often have many options. And in the beginning of your career itself, you choose a path for yourself, that this is the path I'm going to take. So was a particular incident or a particular interaction with a, say, junior official or a public representative such impactful in your career that it helped you decide that I'm going to take this path, and I'm going to, the level of integrity which I am going to project is going to be this? Was there some epiphany or some special moment like this in your initial career which helped you decide that, okay, this is where I draw the line, and this is the path I'm choosing for myself in my career?
Well, it's probably not one event, or there could be one trigger event somewhere which you can remember. But I think it's over a period of time you develop this personality by seeing and hearing about other people. Now, one of the heroes that we heard about was P.S. Appu, who was then the financial commissioner. By the time I was collector, he became chief secretary. But he was the financial commissioner and we have heard legendary stories about him, about how he managed. Then in my subdivisional days, we used to hear about J.M. Lindo, who was then collector of Purnia. Again, how he would do things. So you hear these stories and you pick up the good elements from what they have done. I mean, you don't pick up everything. I mean, this is something that we should do. And what probably uh, uh, kind of pushed me harder into that, of course, Mr. Appu always used to tell me, and I had met him, he used to say one thing, that you shall be interfered with if you are willing to be interfered with. I asked him this question, how do you handle political interference? And he said this. And there was another gentleman called Mr. Bhagirath Lal Das, who also, very quiet, almost a Zen Buddhist kind of personality, who would sort of but not budge an inch on anything. But and all of them told me one thing, that, you have to be very dignified when you're saying no.
Right.
You don't have to show your power, you don't have to show your anger, you don't have to use bad words. In fact, when you are very firm with your no, you should be as polite as possible. That takes the blow away. It's a bit of a you have to practice it. It's not easy. You get angry at a young age. You get angrier faster. But it's a very nice lesson that I learned, that the more polite you are, and people used to say, okay, he's saying all this, then the answer is no. So it's a kind of interesting thing. But I think three incidents, in fact, which I would think did impact me in the early days as subdivisional officer. One was a major flood. When I joined the subdivision, 5 blocks out of 11 were under flood because the Mahananda River had breached.
Okay.
So my first day or second day of my joining, I think the collector told me, and I was staying in some guest house or something, told me that, this particular block is underwater and you should go and have a look at what's the damage and all. So I told my driver, okay, take me there, because the road goes, he said, the road up to the block headquarters is not breached. The rest is all underwater. And this is Ganga and Mahananda from both sides. So it's a bit of a difficult terrain. So when I landed there, I asked the driver, where is the block office? So he told me, sir, do you see that black patch on the just above the water? That's the block office. So I said, so where is the office? It's underwater.
Submerged.
Submerged. Just the roof was visible. So I said, okay, what about the BDO and the staff? So he said, sir, so they are here, they are working. And this fellow was, not even a direct recruit deputy collector. He was promoted from some inspector rank BDO. He had shifted the families and the office to empty railway wagons parked in the railway station, and he was operating from there. I thought that was commitment at a level which, it really said, look, I need to rise up to this man's commitment.
Right.
That's how, it's just a very ordinary kind of a fellow, and he didn't pretend to do anything great. He was just doing, he knew what was coming. He shifted as much as possible. He shifted the families to, I somehow spoke to the station master, got those wagons which are lying there empty to be housed. Some people went out, etc. And he was managing his office from a couple of Petromaxes because there was no generators or anything. And then when I met him, he was quite on top of his job, which I thought was very remarkable. That was one. The second was when we had this flood, major flood going at one level. The rest of the area which was not affected had JPs agitation. This is a 74 JP agitation. Yeah. So they would block roads and transport and all kinds of things. So we were really, under pressure. What do we do? So my collector hit upon an idea. He made a public appeal to Jayaprakash Narayan, saying that, will you kindly suspend your agitation in my district for a few days, because we are battling a big flood and helping poor people. And we thought it's just one of those balloons we floated in the air. But JP picked it up and told his people that please go and help the collector do relief work, because we are not fighting the people. We are fighting the government in power. And these people are doing a job which they are entitled to do. So we had no agitation for about 15 days.
Right.
Which is again something that, it was just when we were discussing this, we said, okay, we'll send this message through a PR thing and AIR thing. Most probably it will be scoffed at, but it did work. The third was that we had a big landlord, and the Land Ceiling Act was being implemented, and his son was a minister. And we had to do his land ceiling case. A lot of Benami transactions. We had no precedence anywhere in India, but we decided to do it. And it's about 4,000 acres or something. And writing that judgment was not easy, because there was some 50 odd transactions. Each had to be heard, cancelled. It took us about 2 months to do.
And you were hearing this in your court, sir, or the collector's court?
Yeah. No, actually, we decided that I'll hear the first hearing so that the collector can hear the appeal.
The appeal, right.
If collector hears the first hearing, the appeal will go to the commissioner, and we thought we'll keep it within ourselves so that we have this interchange of this. Again, an administrative strategy, nothing. Right. It's a question of, it's not that the commissioner wouldn't have done anything great, but he thought it will get delayed, so let's do this.
Right.
We did this. It was probably the first order of annulment of land transfers in the whole of the country. And of course, my ex-deputy director, who is no more, Mr. B.N. Yugandhar, was then in planning commission. I don't know whether you've heard of him. He is Satya
We've heard of
Nadella's father. Basically,
yes,
that's how he
otherwise
is known.
also, we've heard of him otherwise also.
He sent me a letter in those days, a postcard saying that I have heard about this and I want a copy of that for use in Delhi.
Of the order.
So yeah, so he went around saying, "Look at this young IAS officer, what they have done," kind of a thing. So this again confirmed my belief that you do good things. And in fact, a lot of people whom I didn't know came and told me, "Sir, only you could have done this." Not that it is a great compliment, but the fact that people realize that the law can take its own course against a very powerful landlord without any showmanship or without any show of force, just the clean implementation of a law. We knew he will go to the High Court, he got a stay order later,
Right.
but that was not the point. We drove home a point that we will implement the law. And if we had that surplus land, we would have distributed it as well. So people realize that it works that way.
So in the absolute sense, say in the political context, or the in the context of general citizenship or public, I think this kind of an act is very it's looked up upon and it's appreciated. But was the cadre or the bureaucracy in general conducive to such kind of behavior in those times? Were you appreciated within the cadre, or were you like scoffed upon? Or
well, it was a couple of people said good things, but there were a lot of forces rallied up against me.
Right.
In fact, the then chief minister wanted to, I don't know, give me some reward of some sort. The department said, no, he hasn't done anything extraordinary. What he has done is what is expected of an IAS officer. There is a noting in the file. So the CM himself showed it to me. I said, leave it. Mr. Appu told me, don't expect any reward. You should thank the government if they don't punish you, which they did when I was promoted.
Okay.
They all my batchmates were posted to the secretariat. I was posted as charge officer under settlement in Saharsa. Now Saharsa is probably the worst posting you can get in Bihar at that time.
And anyway, the charge officer would have a lot of responsibilities even in those days.
It was nothing great of a job anyway. And survey and settlement is not something that you look up to unless you are a settlement officer.
Right.
So, well, that happened, but luckily, by that time, some other scandal took place in the Cooperative Department.
Okay.
So the corporation minister was from Purnia, and he was looking for somebody who is again, would stand up to pressures and settle that right.
Right.
So then I got posted into the Cooperative Department.
Okay.
So I didn't go to Sarsa finally.
This was in the Cooperative Department, the state.
Then I went to Patna. Okay. This is a famous case where the Patna Urban Cooperative Bank gave a loan against the mortgage of the Patna Gandhi Maidan and the railway station.
Oh,
that's scandalous. That's scandalous.
This is something we read in the papers or see in the movies.
It was actually, I've seen the document.
Yes, it never happened in real life.
And the interesting part is I realized the money also from the borrower. So in fact, I jokingly told the collector Patna after a year saying that, no, I have released both these assets to you. That was more a joke, but we did realize. So it's... So that's how I ended up in Patna.
This was just after your subdivision posting, right, sir?
Yeah. So it can happen. So basically, you don't expect too many rewards for doing anything like this, because it does affect not only a particular landlord, but also the class of landlords who constitute a very powerful lobby within any state.
Absolutely. And any time period, I think it was
there
in your case.
It may land maybe one asset, any asset. People with large number of assets, if you use any law to take it over, you create that powerful block of enemies. But I mean, it's okay. You do what is in the law. So nobody faulted me for this, in the sense that I didn't do anything excessive. Either show up. And whatever was genuine was exempted. So there was a very fair way of looking at what I did. But the question is that I am not happy that you're doing this. You should have
Right.
not even opened the case. So many cases are pending. Why did you have to do it? That's the way it is.
Right. Right, sir.
So I think this did create an impact that, I can do things which are correct according to my conscience, according to the law, and still be there,
right,
and get my promotions on time. It's fair enough.
right, right. And I think your first posting as a DM was in Madhubani, I believe, sir.
Yeah.
And you spent close to about 3 years in that district.
That's right.
And how was that, sir? I mean, what were the...
No, that also was a quirk of fate. That why I went to Madhubani, and I was hoping that I've already done North Bihar, so I'll probably get something south of Ganges. And I was newly married then, so that was another reason why I started looking for a comfortable. I mean, in the sense that hoping that I'll get a place which is at least a bit more urban than Madhubani. But Karpuri Thakur became chief minister in 77. 1977. That's right. And he was a member of parliament from Samastipur. I think he had made up his mind to contest from Madhubani.
Okay.
So he told the chief secretary that I want a South Indian officer who is, will not budge an inch with, because Madhubani is politically a very powerful Congress CPI bastion. And he said, no, somebody who wouldn't be swayed by considerations, etc. So that somehow the thing fell on me and I had to go. That was, but what was more disturbing about Madhubani, other than the political part of it, was the large number of problems in the land reform segment.
Right.
The sharecropping law had been passed long ago, but there were, I think, I don't know how many thousand disputes on sharecropping, with the result that the Kharif harvesting, when I landed up there, had 100+ armed force deputations only for harvesting.
Just for harvesting.
Yeah, there used to be, clashes and stuff like that. So by the time Mr. Appu had become chief secretary, and he told me that, look, your target is to reduce this. We cannot have armed forces doing harvesting, and I think you have to resolve these disputes. So that was a major task, took time. Had run-ins with the High Court because they wouldn't understand the sharecropping law.
Right.
Had run-ins with, police was also not very cooperative. They were mostly with the landlords, all kinds of issues. CPI had a very powerful presence there, so they were a counter force on the other side. But I think we set about doing that very methodically, and luckily I had 2 IAS STOs by then in both the subdivisions who were also equally, committed, and Shiv Basant was one of them. Mr. NS Madhavan was the other. And I also had DN Gautam
as my
ASP.
moment, sir. Shiv Basant sir is actually the editor of the Palash magazine.
So you can tell him I mentioned him.
Right, sir. Most definitely.
And the DN Gautam was my ASP. So that was a great set of people to work around. Right. And we did remove most of the problems. I think at the end of 3 years, we had probably about 15 or 20 deputations.
Right, sir. Right.
That was something, because ultimately we wanted peace, because without having resolved all these conflicts, you cannot bring in agriculture growth. We cannot bring in other development. So that Madhubani was that experiment that I think we did reasonably well.
Right.
We reduced the tensions, which is extremely important. Any kind of tension in society is a bad thing.
Right.
Whichever way, economic, social, cultural, religious.
Most definitely, sir. So I think later into your career, sir, I think you specialized into the agriculture or food domain. So now, sir, had you made up your mind by the time you were collector itself that you're going to specialize in these domains, or was it just the way things turned up? Or
no, it was exactly the opposite of what I did for most of the time.
Right.
After my district, I went to Dhanbad, of course. I came back again.
We'll come back to Dhanbad, sir. But since you did a lot in the agriculture
of fate, I wanted a posting in Delhi.
Right, sir.
And then I went to urban development. That is the ministry which picked me up. So that was how I
Urban
landed
Development,
there.
Government of India or Government of
Yeah,
Bihar?
yeah.
Or Government of
Government of India.
Right.
For 5 years, I had again, excellent people whom I worked with. So I thought, okay, this is an area which is very interesting, growing, very important cities and all that. I did a substantial amount of work on urban development. But by the time from there I came back, I was posted to Industries Department in Bihar, where I continued almost 3 years in different positions.
Right, sir.
Except for that which break in Gaya.
Right, sir.
Then I had a personal compulsion to take up posting to Kerala. So I was looking around which commodity board is available. So Spices Board became available and I got there. So I went into commerce.
Right. Right.
And in Spices Board at that time, the GATT agreement was being renegotiated. WTO was being formed. So it was a very interesting, challenging space that I got into.
Right, sir.
And agriculture being a very controversial kind of a commodity. So I worked on trade actually.
Right, sir.
And again, therefore, I went to WTO.
That's how you found it. Right, sir.
Then I could even write a paper which WTO published as a book. So
Okay.
all that happened. So I thought, okay, I'm a commerce specialist. So
Right.
I should be looking at that in my career. Okay. I came back to Bihar from there. Again, I was in mines and industries. So industry, trade, industry. Right. Then from there, and for a short spell in Ranchi, then I went back to textiles, which is also part of the commerce thing. So right. When I left the textile ministry, I was reasonably certain I'm going to be, like 15 to 18 years of my experience was trade industry. Right. I just landed up in the food ministry again by another accident. Because there was a food shortage in the country in 2006 and they had to import. They were looking for somebody who will do it, who will actually do it and not create a problem for the government. So I think
through the trade, so I was right. So through your expertise in trade, you found a way into the food.
Much larger thing, but then from food I went to agriculture, and from there on I thought I'll stay in that space.
Yes, sir. So
it's not by choice.
For me, at least, this conversation is very interesting, sir. I'll take a few more minutes of your time, sir.
Sure.
But we'll come back to the Bihar cadre, sir. Why and how were you posted to Dhanbad, sir? Because Dhanbad is considered to be a place which is it's very difficult to handle all the coal transportation, the coal mafia, and etc. So
Dhanbad actually happened again. Most of my postings were accidents.
Right. Sir.
I mean, I don't know whether they became happy consequences later, but I can look at every posting. There was a reason which I heard later why it happened. Right. So I was comfortably sitting in the old secretariat in Civil Supplies Department, which was again a food shortage year. So right. I was put there specifically to look at some of these things. And one day the CM called me and said that you have to go. I said, sir, where to? No, I'm posting you as DC of Dhanbad. So I asked the Chief Secretary, Mr. Nair was Chief Secretary then. I asked him, sir, kya hua suddenly? He said, what has happened is that there has been this increase in mafia activity there. So some of the coal mines had to be closed down. So these coal fellows have gone to Delhi and they have somehow approached the Prime Minister.
So this must be after the coal nationalization took place, Coal India.
Yeah. This is 82.
Right.
Nationalization was 71.
Right, sir.
71 and 73.
Right.
That time, KB Saxena and I don't know who, CM Jha and all must have been there. We were not even SDOs at that. We are not even actually, 73 was we were trainees.
Yes.
82. Right. So they had got across to, because there was, I think, a collector who was found uncomfortable. He was a very straightforward and good officer. I would say exceptionally good. But they found him uncomfortable and they removed him for some reason. And they didn't agree on a name because there were two very powerful ministers from there. So I think that day morning, probably as I hear it, the PM had a word with the CM and said, what are you doing about Dhanbad? I'm very unhappy or something of that sort. Right. So again, look for somebody who's a nice scapegoat who will go and do the dirty work, clean up the sewer and then we'll take care of it later, kind of a thing. So I was asked to go the next day morning, take a car and go. So that's how I landed up there.
Right, sir. And how was the
So that
experience,
was again,
sir? Actually getting
well, that was what you call hitting the road running.
right, right,
I had rung up people and say, no, I want all the National Security Act files, all the crime control files brought to the circuit house by the time I take over. So I
right.
think I started reading crime control files before I went to the treasury.
Okay.
So the night I read all of them, morning I took over. So, and then I decided, okay, this is my, and I had a good young SP who is no more, who was also kind of, supportive of what I wanted to do. At that time, Bokaro was part of Dhanbad. So there was another superintendent of police there. But Bokaro was a quieter part of the
So it had
system.
2 police districts, but only one.
One DC and one DIG for Dhanbad, actually.
Okay, there was one DIG as well.
So,
Right.
DIG used to sit in Bokaro.
Right.
So that was how it was. But
Right.
well, that was really a challenge.
Right.
Really, really a challenge.
And did you
So
feel
that's where I learned to, the National Security Act then was passed, and people were hesitating to use it because every collector who issues a detention order has to appear before an advisory bench of the High Court.
Right.
And justify your detention, otherwise they will release. So it's about within 45 days this ratification happens.
Okay.
So I had to go, I think, about 35 times
Right.
during my tenure. So I used to take a night train, go to Patna High Court, appear in all my cases, come back by the night train. But I must say, except one, they upheld all my detention orders.
Right. It's almost now 10 or 11 years of your service, sir. And you must have felt a lot of stressful moments in the first 11, 12 years of your service. Was there any moment where you felt like almost breaking and thinking that this service is not for me and I must leave this service, or this particular job is not for me, and almost the point of breaking? Was there any moment of that sort in the first 11, 12 years of your career, sir?
Not really in the first 11, 12 years. I think my disappointment started when I went into the secretariat, when I realized that, what am I doing here?
Right.
So at one point, I almost thought I'll quit. I think that was about maybe 98 or 99 or so.
Right.
Then I looked around for options. I had options, but I think on second thoughts, I did come back. So I took a break for about 4 or 5 months. I went home, did explore some things, and finally, okay, I can fight it out. So there is that moment which comes, but sometimes it's momentary, sometimes it's over a long period of stress. And this disappointment actually comes in the secretariat, and when you are in charge of a department, and then you realize that you're not making a big impact. That is a very difficult situation, because you have spent, you have invested about 20 years of your life into something, and you want to make a difference. And it's not just, okay, I want to take my pension and retire, then there is no problem. But if you really want to make a difference to the people that you are serving, and if you have that very strong commitment coming up all the time, and when you are in an environment where your senior colleagues in the cabinet, everything seems to be pulling the other way around in terms of the value system that you believe in.
Right.
Not necessarily that they're doing wrong things, but you want to do certain things which are, right, which can be done, and there are forces which are preventing you from doing it. Then you feel it's not worth it.
Right.
So, later what happens is you don't have options.
Right.
When you cross 30 years, then what is your option? Or 20, 25, 28 years, then you look for your pension. So the crisis comes between the age of 40 and 50.
Right. Right.
That's a time when probably, of course, many state governments now give a lot of opportunities to people. But sometimes this pressure gets on, and especially when you see a lot of dishonesty around, a lot of inefficiency around, and you feel helpless, then it gets on. Not otherwise.
So
I mean, little bit of opposition from people, interference, we can handle that.
right.
You know, you're born to fight.
Yes, sir,
If there is no fight, that is where the problem is.
So looking back, sir, have you gotten over that disillusionment, or did this fade off, or are you still disillusioned with that particular period of time that you spent in the secretariat?
Well, not really. I think I've got over it, because ultimately you realize you have limitations, and that's probably why the frustrations come. That you think that you can make the change, then you realize that, okay, given this system and where you are placed, between the rules of procedure, rules of executive business, and various other cabinet decisions, and the way it functions,
Right.
you realize, well, you couldn't have made a bigger difference. Well, while the frustration has gone, the sorrow remains. I could have done better.
Right.
I could have done more for the people.
Right.
I could have been more effective had there been a better circumstance. Or sometimes I look at other states and similarly placed people have performed better. Why is it that I have not been able to do?
Right.
That sorrow remains, but that's, of course, once you retire, then all that is gone. Then
I believe, sir, in the early part of 2000s, you joined the Jharkhand cadre as such for the first time, right, sir? And having spent a bulk of your career in the Bihar cadre, in the erstwhile Bihar cadre, and only a small portion of your postings in say a place like Dhanbad. So what was could you immediately perceive a difference that as soon as you joined the Jharkhand cadre, you saw, okay, things are being done differently over here? Or was it more gradual that over the next 2 or 3 years you realize, okay, that this is a different cadre and things are being done differently over here? Because we hear a lot of senior officers who like to always say that the Bihar cadre was slightly different in some better ways and some worse ways, but the Jharkhand cadre is very different from the Bihar cadre. So how did the two compare, sir, when you joined for the first time?
well, one is that I wasn't in the cadre when Jharkhand got created. I was in Delhi.
Right.
So I was in the Ministry of Textiles, I think, when 2000 was the state formed, right?
Yes, sir, 2000.
So
November 2000.
my very close interaction with Jharkhand was actually when I was RDC, just prior to that,
Regional
97
Development
to
Committee.
99. Yeah.
Right.
So I had the whole of Jharkhand in terms of my
Jurisdiction.
jurisdiction.
Yes, sir. Yes.
And even though law and order was out of my hands and some revenue functions were not there, the development part of it was largely with me, and I really enjoyed that bit. I mean, that was, in fact, if I were to look back, I think RDC Ranchi would have been one of my best postings,
Right.
from my perspective. In fact, I declined an offer to be a joint director in LBSNA at that time, because I said I'm doing more important work here. In fact, Mr. Baswan was director. He came to Ranchi and said, please come as my joint director. I said, no, I'm doing much better work. This is an enjoyable part of my career, and I'm making a difference to people. So I'm not going to come and waste my time in Mussoorie. So that's the level to which I was committed to it. But then again, I wanted to be in Delhi after some time, and at your own personal life also dictates where you want to be. Right. So children's education, things like that does matter. So I did apply and I got picked up. So in 2000, when the cadre was being formed, all these people who are very powerful political leaders used to come and sit in my room and will you come back and all. I said, no, at this stage of my personal life, I'm not willing to make a shift. Right. But at the same time, I think a lot of development agenda, a lot of other things were discussed. And I still remember that I had said, please don't clone Bihar and make another Chota Bihar of Jharkhand. Do things differently. But I also said that Jharkhand has a proclivity for higher corruption. And I was very clear on that. I said it in so many words. So you have to be very careful how you handle that. Because one way is don't take any decision, don't do anything, therefore there is no corruption. The other is you need a faster pace of development. How do you sort of do this? Therefore, the processes have to be changed. But I came back in 2005 for a year. I think that's all that I spent there.
Okay.
And therefore, and I was quite disappointed that, things hadn't moved, because the aspirations of creating a new state because I was part of it as RDC, because I could hear these voices from different political parties other than the party in power in Patna,
Right.
social groups, and I used to meet, I used to know at least about 2 dozen NGOs who were working in Jharkhand then.
Right.
And all of them had something or the other. They had a vision of a new state, which was more equitable, more pro-tribal, more employment-oriented, more economic growth, less corruption, less process difficulties, etc. I didn't see those translated into
Right.
the governance models that were by then. And when I came, of course, I was posted as DG ATI. So therefore, my impact was fairly limited, even though in another 3 months I moved as development commissioner and chairman electricity board, etc. But that was again a kind of a quick changeover. But at that time, the most important thing that happened was the Right to Information Act.
Right.
So I said, okay, this is part of the ATI business. So I picked that up. And actually, as RDC, and I think at that time, the person who helped me most was Mr. Rajiv Kumar, the current Chief Electoral Election Commissioner.
Right.
He was MD of IADA, and all that. So what we did was we, much before RTI came, and this I think people there who was associated with RTI, like Harivansh will tell you, is that we found out that in many blocks when we go, and we used to travel to all these so-called Naxalite blocks and all, because there's no reason why, unless of course there is a clear, strict instruction not to go there. We used to go there, and we found that people were, being asked for money for applications, being, all kinds of small things. So we did a 2-pager. I don't think that's available with me, but must be somewhere. We did a 2-pager on what all benefits the citizens can get and what is the process of application, that you don't have to write a printed thing. This is the information that you need to give. And we ensured that this information is painted on the walls of the BDO's offices. Because many of them resisted, because that would have put an end to the kind of touting that was going around. But we did that. We forced it, did that. So when RTI came, I was very happy. In fact, I told the CM, I said, why don't you put up billboards everywhere with your photograph and saying that, the old age pension scheme is like this, the other things are like this is how you apply. If you don't get it, please ring up, kind of a thing. He didn't buy the argument, but anyway, but we pushed quite a bit of it. So I was there just about a year. So I don't think I made a great contribution within that year with 3 jobs each of
but
6
you did
months.
notice the differences between the two administrative cultures in that year itself, sir?
Yeah, did. I thought the cadre was not as united as Bihar would have been, but I wasn't happy because I wanted that, the Jharkhand government would follow the procedures of something like the Tamil Nadu government, which delivers much, or Andhra for that matter. I said, why don't, or even Gujarat, because at that time, Hasmukh Adhia was doing a lot of experimentation in Gujarat. And since the chief minister was BJP, I told him, sir, let's follow the Gujarat model.
Right.
Uska procedure hum log yahan le lete hain. But somehow, I mean, I would say that I didn't stay long enough to do that, but it didn't catch, much attention.
Right, sir. Right, sir. And you moved to the government of India.
Yeah, then I moved. I mean, again, by a quirk of fate, I was told to fly the next day and take over as food secretary, because they had removed the food secretary by then.
So in the 4 or 5 years that you were secretary to the government of India, I think while researching, I found a very interesting phase. I think in 2009, sir, we had one of the worst droughts in the history of independent India. So what was the environment like then, sir, and what were the steps that that you took or you planned to take to manage that situation?
2009 was again, the fact that there is a drought came as a surprise.
Right.
Because till that point, because they, the IMD normally gives you a long-term range forecast, which is based on statistical averages, which is
Right.
Probably, from a science perspective, it's a terrible thing to do, but they said it will be a normal monsoon.
Right.
And suddenly, I think around the third week of June, if I remember correctly, they went to town and predicted a drought, and they didn't even tell me that they're going to say this to the media. So there was absolute panic, which even hit the union cabinet.
So the department and the media got to know the news at roughly the same time.
Yeah. I mean, we switched on the TV and we heard it. Actually, I had told the IMD fellows that give me a weekly update.
Right.
On what is happening to the monsoon, and they were giving me every Monday, and then suddenly on a Thursday or a Wednesday they decided that there is a drought.
Okay.
So we were a bit unprepared for that magnitude, but I think having said that, what else can you do?
Okay.
You do muster all your resources and then do what you have to do.
Right.
So having come from the food department, I had an advantage of looking at food security issues in a much more detailed manner. So that helped me quite a bit. And then agriculture had a very good team of additional secretaries and joint secretaries. And I think all of them became secretaries to Government of India. So that itself shows their competence. And so I pulled all of them together. I said, let's do what is best possible now. How much land do we lose? How much area do we not get? We monitor every day. And in that business, we thought that we cannot work without the state secretaries. So next day, we called a meeting of state secretaries. By that time, the video conferencing facility in secretariats were on. I mean, there was no Zoom or anything, but a VC room was available in each chief secretary's adjoining guest room or something. So we had a meeting. Some of them came physically, some of them. Then we realized that, and this is immediately after a big import of wheat for the country. So, the panic level was very, very high. Do we have to go to import again, kind of a thing? And rice is much more difficult than wheat. And when you have a shortage of rain, it's more the kharif that gets hit. So we said, look, one is that we'll have to produce as much as possible. What we lose in kharif, we have to make up in rabi. So we start planning. And more importantly, we said there are farmers who may not be able to sow paddy. Therefore, what do we do for their livelihoods? So we had to look at alternate crops, what seeds are available, where are they available, private, public. We procured all of them. And we also announced a diesel subsidy for protecting as much crops as possible. And we expanded the NREGA. In fact, the limit of 100 days was broken for the first time. We had to go to the cabinet to get it done. There was opposition, but we managed to do that.
That was only for the drought affected districts, sir, or across the country?
No, anybody who did more than 100 days.
Okay, right.
Whose averages crossed, because if you have space, why do you have to?
Absolutely, right.
So we said, if your average is already crossed, like number of card holders or any area where you have crossed 100 days. In fact, in most districts, we allowed them that you can cross the individual limit as long as you don't cross the average. I think that covered 90% of the districts.
Okay.
Only Rajasthan and probably one or two other states had 2 or 3 districts which had that problem. But it was important that we have livelihoods. And then we looked at the public distribution system in a more closer way. But I think while we were pushing Kharif as much as possible, and thanks to Western UP, Punjab and Haryana, where we ensured that they have full electricity, because one of the fallouts of a drought is your hydel power goes down. So then, there are other problems. So we had to push electricity into those areas which had standing crops, diesel subsidy into those areas which have no electric connection, like Bihar.
Right, sir.
And we did manage Kharif to a reasonable level, but I think we put all our efforts in Rabi and compensated. So it was, what should I say, like a war room. We created a war room almost on a daily basis, and IMD would come and give a presentation in a more detailed fashion every Monday morning with the minister presiding. And that meeting will take a decision on what to do, which state. And Friday afternoons, compulsorily, we will meet all the agriculture secretaries online. If somebody says, no, we need more power or more fertilizer or something, then that was kind of, so it was how you do an emergency management.
Right.
But we didn't import rice, we didn't import wheat. and we didn't have, I mean, at least as far as I know, not starvation that's reported
Right.
anywhere.
Right.
So that's,
The
of
drought
course,
was severe,
water
but
was one
it
of the crises that, yeah.
didn't lead to a famine, right, sir?
Not at all, not at all. Not even to a shortage in that sense of any particular pocket. Even
Right.
Rajasthan, we ensured that people had whatever we committed in terms of PDS was given. In addition, we ensured that the open market behaves.
Right.
Like we banned all exports. We did a lot of uh, the economists call it regressive measures, we call it restrictive measures. So administration has to respond. I mean, economists can write later. So Ashok Gulati, who's a good friend of mine, still criticizes me for what I did, but
Right.
I still stand by what I did. So
Right. Right.
no regrets at all. I think it was in my view, it was a situation reasonably well managed.
Right, sir.
I wouldn't say exceptionally good, but within the limitations we did manage. And I must say the government stood by us quite a bit. They gave us extra money where it was required. They gave us extra allocations of other resources like diverting power to agriculture fields. All that was possible. So that's it.
So it's almost been, I think, slightly more than a decade that you've retired from the service, sir. Although I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you spent some time in the NDDB even after retirement.
Officially 2016, I mean officially 10, but
Right.
effectively 16. 6
Right.
years I worked again.
Right, sir. Sir, even though you're a retired IAS officer and a retired IAS officer still has access to a lot of things that a common person doesn't have, but still, sir, what is your perspective on the IAS as a retired person or as a citizen of the country? Do you think that the IAS has fulfilled its promise, sir? That the promise that it made to the country when it was, say, established, or is it halfway around, or it has completely failed? I mean, what is your perspective, sir? Both as
No,
an officer.
I wouldn't say completely failed, nor would I say it has fulfilled. I think it's a varying degree of, and different states have had different levels of performance. But let's say, couple of fundamentals on which we need to judge the service. It's very easy to make a judgment based on what you perceive, but I would think that my judging an officer or the service as a whole or a cadre as a whole would be, do you abide by the constitution? Do you protect the interests of the weaker sections or minorities or people who are being harmed against, whether economically, socially, religious minority, whatever? I mean, I don't want to get into that debate of religious minority kind of a thing. There is a lot of atrocity that happens against the lower castes in Hindus as well. It happens to economically poorer people, even from upper castes.
Right.
So it is, what is your responsibility? Your responsibility, in one word, is to provide justice and equity. Equity is more, an economic kind of an aspect. So it's a bit difficult, but justice clearly is within your right, within your powers. So have you delivered? Have you stood up for the poorer people as much as you should? Is one question that I keep asking people. So to that extent, I would say that I would think that there has been some deterioration of, say, last 15-20 years.
Right.
In standing up for what is right. I think that ability to stand up for right, and it's not necessarily the fault of the officer. I think the system doesn't seem to encourage that or even protect. I mean, there may be some places where it's even disincentivized. So that is one aspect on which I would judge the people. The second is that the younger generation has much more technology support than what we ever thought of. We didn't even have a direct dialing telephone. I mean, forget anything else.
Right.
How have we harnessed the power of technology to do better for the people is a question that I think every IAS officer should ask himself.
Right.
Are we bound down by processes which are antiquated, where technology is not suitable? Can we change those processes to deliver better? Right. There are various examples of how it has been done. All of us know it. I mean, we file our income tax much better now. Yes. So in our own little spheres, have we made those changes? And I know a lot of examples where people have tried to do. One of my colleagues who did the railway reservation system had to face a lot of problems for 2 years because the lobbies around the New Delhi railway station wouldn't let him do it. So it's not been easy, but people have shown the way. So that is another thing. How do we harness technology for the betterment of poorer people? The third is, do we have this great fire in our belly to make a change, a positive change to where we are? It doesn't matter that, like I said, the frustration, but that frustration shouldn't give way to your accepting, what acha chalta hai kind of a thing. So making a change in the system, mostly at operational level for IAS officers, only at the secretary level you make that policy change, is something I think we have to be continuously at it. Right. And here is where I think that as a service, we are not, communicating enough within ourselves. This urge to change will come from my experience and your knowledge of technology. But I'll be, from a technology perspective, I'll be far behind your level. But from an experience perspective of, what works and what does not work, I'll be far ahead of you. So I think this communication is not happening. And I had suggested to the academy to create mentorships, that many of us have some time, that if a young officer gets into trouble, I can spare an hour talking to him. I don't have a problem.
Right.
Provided I know what the issue is, what are the best available solutions, I can connect to other batchmates of mine who might have done something of that sort, or maybe some joint secretary of mine who has worked with me and whom I know is competent enough to advise. Now, this mentorship is not happening across India, even though Mussoorie made an attempt. I went there, but I'm not happy with what they have done. It's more form than any content. So this is one thing you must probably want to do in Jharkhand, because the Jharkhand officers, I think, have this unique disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Unlike Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu counterparts, of knowing what is the best practice in the world.
Absolutely.
Even if you want to implement. So I think that's one. So I wouldn't say that the service has let down, etc. But yes, as a system, I think there are lots of areas where we need to do better for three different reasons. One is that it's not anything political, but I think identity politics is gaining ground everywhere in the world, and this can create divides.
Right.
And as an administrator, it's our job not to have divides.
Right.
So it's a bit of a complex situation. How do we work around such issues is one. Second is, we don't know what will happen in the next 10 years in terms of the technology. And technology can also divide people. I mean, we do talk about digital divide many times, but I don't think we do anything much about it. So that is the other part. The third is that there is a data overrun that is happening in all governments. I mean, there's huge volumes of data. Everybody is very happy. They talk about data stacks and all. But behind these numbers, there are individuals. There are human beings whose life is somewhere at stake. And that, I think, is a recognition that we need to take whenever we open a laptop. And what would I think? The last point that I always tell young officers, the best thing that you can do is to listen to people. You don't have to accept what they say, but listening to people is what actually gets you to the truth. Everything else is, a bit remote. Secondary data, hearsay, all that, reports, they're good for certain reasons. But if you're in the field, I think listening to actual people is, in fact, even as Secretary Agriculture, I used to go sit with farmers, listen to them. ICR will tell me a story, oh, the seed is very good and all that. Then you go to the farmer, they'll tell you, sir, it's a problem.
Right.
So it's a bit of, it balances you out. Right. Not necessarily that they will tell you everything, but they start trusting you when you start listening to them. So it's, listening to me is one thing I think we have forgotten, the art of listening. All of us want to speak, be in Facebook, be here, be there. It's a bit of a step back as far as I am concerned.
Right.
Yep.
But let me take this opportunity to assure you, sir, that we, the younger batches, are agitating, and we'll definitely, try to bridge that gap that has cropped up between the older batches and the younger batches. So just one last question, sir. Given an opportunity, will you still join the IAS? today, given an opportunity today?
Of course, I will do.
Right.
It has given me, suppose I choose another profession, maybe I would have made more money, etc. But I think the richness of experience,
absolutely,
and the satisfaction that I made a difference to some people. I mean, you can always, it's your own assessment of whom you have helped do something.
right.
I think that opportunity doesn't come anywhere. So I have no hesitation, even though my children won't agree, none of them join. So I wouldn't. I think I had a satisfying career. Basically, well, there are frustrations in any job, and my real frustration, as I told you, is I could have done better. I could have helped more people. I could have probably made a bigger difference. Is something, in a sense, it is not a frustration. It's like playing golf. I could have done better.
Right.
So that stays. So I still try. So I try to talk to younger people and try to tell them whatever I have learned. So that's another way of impacting what I would have done myself.
It's very inspiring, sir, that even after, it's been more than 50 years since you first joined the service in 72.
Yeah.
And even after 5 decades, you still retain that energy and that enthusiasm to make change, make some positive change to the society. It's very inspirational for us, sir. And I'll definitely be looking forward to meet you in person when you are here in Jharkhand.
Yeah, I'm there on 18th and 19th.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can.
There is